All right, here we go.
Hey, there he is. Hey, Patrick.
Hey, what's up, Brad? So we're just going to continue on this series of scaling your racket string business. And so we've already covered upgrading the equipment, building partnerships, offering diverse services. If you haven't seen any of those three videos, go ahead and go back. They are also on this stream of videos. So today, the next thing out of these 9 is racket maintenance and tune-up. So we all have different experience with this in my own stringing over the years, and then with Brad and his stringing, and just to kind of give an overview of some of these things that, when you're thinking about scaling your business up, these are things that can help you by, replacing grips. Simple thing, right? Well, so what are the details? Basically what you're doing, of course, right? Just replacing worn out grips, and when you're starting to scale up and you need to scale your inventory, you've got to kind of have a good variety of grips, right? One size doesn't fit all. So having tacky grips, absorbent grips, cushion grips, just to suit players. And some players probably don't really care that much, but others really are looking for something specific. Like for me, my hands actually never really sweat a lot when I
Yeah.
play tennis. So tacky is definitely something I want. Now, if you tend to be in an area maybe where you have a lot of humidity or you sweat a lot when you play, obviously you're going to go with something more absorbent, right? Some people want something that's a little bit more cushioned to kind of a softer feel. And so just having those options, and every company, whether it's Wilson, Head, Babolat, Yonex, they all have offerings in these different things. And if you just go with one company, you can offer everything. Or if you kind of pick and choose based on price points and everything like that, and that's definitely something that you want to recommend to your clients and say, hey, keep your racket going. If you're going to spend a bunch of money on stringing, keep the performance up. Always ask if you want another grip, over grip, or regrip. And of course, we didn't really talk about the leather grip. Some people do I've always liked the leather grip underneath of a tacky over grip, just for that firm feeling. And so that's always an option. And make sure that you charge, to install these. You
Yeah,
have
for sure.
grip, and then add something on to the install, because it might not take a lot just for one racket, but when you think about it, might take you 5 minutes. By the time you're all done, 10 minutes, it adds that much to a restringing. So might as well
Right.
make sure that you can scale that and also make some money from it.
Yep, a few extra bucks is a good thing to have. And also, one of the things that I find frustrating as a home stringer, and like I said, I do maybe somewhere between 800 and 950 rackets a year. But one thing that's frustrating to me occasionally, what's up, Luke, is when you have a customer ask you for something and you don't have it. So it's not expensive. To have a few different grips, a few different varieties. It doesn't cost a lot, and it's nice to have it if your client asks. I do carry a few different replacement grips, and then also as a service, I find over grips. And I usually will offer those at no charge to someone that might have a beat up grip, especially as a home stringer when I'm trying to separate myself from the pro shops where all these players walk past to drive their racket to my house. I want to give them something special, and everyone loves a bargain. Everyone likes being treated special. So in most cases, I see a dirty old grip. I'll say, hey, would you like a complimentary over grip? And you can find those. Sometimes you get good deals on those, 50 cents to $1. So
especially if you buy like a 30 pack or a 50 pack.
Yeah, I
know Wilson used to have these rolls that were 30 pack, nice tacky grips, and they were a good price. And so yeah, that I would definitely say an over grip would be a good freebie to throw in to kind of promote yourself and offer that customer service and not charge for that. But with the grips, I think that's definitely something that it's the price of those grips usually $3 to $4 each at cost, and so I probably wouldn't put that in a freebie.
Yeah, those have gone up in price now.
Yeah,
Those can be $5, $6, $7,
yeah,
$8. So
yeah,
you,
depending on what kind you're getting at.
sure,
So yeah,
yeah.
definitely. And of course, in each of these different things that we're going to talk about, I also want to mention the items that you need in order to um, add this service. And some of the things seem real simple, but really you just have a good, have an area where you have all your tools. You can put all your tools, or you can have a drawer for just your tools for your gripping, and have some of your grip, because there's always those little extras that you end up getting, right? A couple extra wraps, or the tape, um, uh, to secure it, or double-sided tape, things like that. Keep that all in one drawer.
Yes,
And
and
so,
another thing is the shrink sleeves. Those are
yeah,
important to have. I always have a few times a year. People, can you build my grip up? So they
yep,
sell two different sizes: the white and black shrink sleeves, a heat gun, and you can build the grip up. Maybe they want to go from a 4 1/4 to 4
yep,
3/8.
exactly. So as far as the grips and stuff, of course, you need your replacement grips, all the different types that there are. Kind of look at that. There's a lot of different variety. Double-sided adhesive tape, because of course, the grips come with tape on the back. However, if you just took a grip off and you're maybe putting one on that's been on there before, or you just want to make sure it's secure because you don't want it to move once it's been installed for your client. So sometimes adding an extra layer of double-sided tape, I'll put that on the actual, the handle before I put the grip back on, or before I put a new grip on, I'll do that. Over grip finishing tape, that's important. I know, the grips come with a little piece of finishing tape, but if you have a roll, you got to have a roll of finishing tape, because it's usually not enough, or those actually come loose after some time. So I always like to use finishing tape from a roll.
Yeah, like an black electrical tape or
Yeah.
whatever.
And
And I
don't
get that
break it, and
also.
don't break it off at the end. People break it off at the end, and then it looks all crumply at the end when you
No,
break
you
the
got to
finishing
cut it
tape.
and make it look
Oh,
clean and together. I
yes.
just
Cut it.
unwrapped the one I did the other day because it
Yeah,
looked sloppy, and I just
yeah.
redid it.
I
It's like,
I always used to cut it at an angle, so
mm,
that and then you try to wrap it, like when you're doing this for professionals, and you're doing this for people like who are meticulous about their rackets. Some people are even like, want the finishing tape evenly wrapped around, so it doesn't, when you've already reached it, over a layer, to make sure that it's not sticking higher up, or making it thicker. It just
yeah.
evenly goes on the layer, and then cut it at an angle so it just looks really clean.
And
And that's
another thing, oh yeah,
no, go ahead, sorry.
another thing to keep in mind is make sure before you put a grip on for someone that you know whether they're right-handed or left-handed. I had someone hand me a racket the other day who's a right-handed player, and I said, "Oh, who put this grip on for you?" And they said, they mentioned a pro. I said, "Oh, that makes sense because they put it on as a lefty." And the
Yep,
person was a lefty,
yep,
so it
very
was more
good.
natural for them to put it on as if it was a left-handed player. So make sure you know if they're left-handed or right-handed,
Mhm.
because I had a lefty the other day that I gave 2 complimentary over grips to, and as soon as I remembered they were lefty, I'm like, "Oh crap, I got to be a little more focused here on this and get it right because I'm not left-handed. It's just a little more awkward going the opposite way for me than
Yep,
I normally do."
exactly that. And just understanding how to, when you're putting a grip on, how to, put it together, like when you're wrapping it, to make sure it doesn't overlay too much, to make it thick in those parts, and then
Right.
you run short, because some of them are not designed for longer handles. They're
Yeah.
just enough, right, if you do it right. And you don't want to make it too thin, where eventually it creates a break in between, the where the grip is, right?
Sure, right, because they start playing and it slides a tiny bit, and all of a sudden they've got the exposure of the grip underneath it.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of time to get that right. Practice on your own rackets, and just keep working at it till you get that perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good. All right, the next thing, frame inspection. I always like to do this before I let the customer go. So like, I'll sometimes be standing there talking to him or whatever, and then I'll be inspecting it, because if there's a crack or a little fracture, or something you want to tell them about, like, oh, your grommets are cracked, or you got a lot of wear in the head guard, or it's showing through the frame is showing because the head guard. So if you can do all of that while they're there, then you can talk about, okay, we maybe want to think about getting a grommet replacement or a new head guard, or we might need to do some tubing, or I need to do some extra cleaning on this racket,
Right.
or you've got a little bit of a stress. It might not be too bad, but do you want to have this strung, or maybe look at getting a new racket, that kind of thing. And so it's an opportunity to have excellent customer service right there to alleviate any additional contact you have to make with the customer later on. And also you could upsell based on what the situation is. Now, that's not always going to happen. If you have a drop-off situation where people can drop off their rackets, you might need to contact them. But I always make sure I make connection with the customer before I string anything that looks a little bit out of sorts, that might create a problem, and you might end up making it worse.
Yeah, it's a great point, especially if the strings are still in the racket. You could always take a picture showing that you haven't taken the strings out yet. This is their old strings, and you just circle it. Hey, there's a little hairline stress fracture here. I just wanted to point it out to you before we go ahead and do this. So and I tend to take, if someone leaves the strings in, I'll usually take a picture of the pattern anyway. Just in case I run into any issue along the way, I can see, hey, why did they?
Yeah. Yep. Always inspect the racket with the strings in it before you do anything. That's a good point.
Because then they could blame you. And it's like, well,
wait exactly. Now, what's really interesting on this next, well, actually, I think that'll be the next part, but yeah. So for this, some items that you might need. I mean, I never really used a magnifying glass. That's real. I mean, that might be real specific, but
when I use a magnifying glass,
I
use a magnifying glass if I'm trying to identify the name on a string and I can't, what I mean? If someone's trying to ask me, what is the string? And you see some writing, but it's so small. So I will use a magnifying glass, and sometimes it helps. Or you take a picture with your phone and then really blow up that image to see if you can make it out.
Yeah, that's good too. And nowadays, using the light on your phone can also kind of help, look at the racket a lot closer.
Yeah.
Of course, if you can test the flex of the racket by having, some equipment for that would always be good. But, for flex and other purposes, having a ruler, measuring tape, all those kind of things you're going to need for different things when you're looking at the frame. Sometimes, before, if you're looking at a racket going, wow, that head looks a little bit round, it's no longer oval, right? So that's obviously something that, you want to look at and tell the customer too. And you're not going to be able to mention that if you've already cut the strings out, because many times it'll relieve that pressure, right? And if somebody strung it wrong and created the shape to like deform, it's going to probably create some damage to the racket. It might do it again. So, that's something that you definitely want to note. All right, grommet repair. That's a big one. I think we just talked about checking the grommets and replacing them and so forth. And there's kind of that fine line between, do I just tube it with some tubing, or do I replace the whole grommet kit and so forth? Now, of course, why do we replace grommets and why do we replace head guards? I kind of put both those in the same category, and they are different. Sometimes you can buy head guards alone, and you can buy complete grommet kits, which would normally include a head guard as well. And sometimes I would buy a whole kit if I had to, and I wouldn't actually use the grommets. I would just use the head guard.
Yeah, I do that often.
Keep the grommets. I always keep all that stuff, because in case you need just individual grommets, you can cut one out of that and use that later on. But the whole idea here is, what's the best way to repair the racket so that it doesn't deform anything, it doesn't reduce the life of the string, and it keeps the performance of the string, right? Because if you start tubing like if there's like the grommets are cracking and you have 5 or 6 places you need to tube, not only is that going to take you a lot of extra time, but somewhere the integrity of the string or the performance of it might be shortened to some degree, right? or you might get some additional vibration. That happens sometimes because of the way that the tubing is and all that. Now, if this is the racket somebody has and they love this racket and you can't get a new grommet kit, you can always replace the grommets, but definitely charge for that.
Yeah. Yeah. $10 seems to be a fairly common price that people charge.
Yeah,
for
if it's just a couple, and if you need to do, if you need to do a bunch, then that's obviously a whole different thing, because when you're stringing it, it takes you extra time too, because you got to hold it certain ways when you're pulling the strings through so that the grommet, the tubing or the new grommet seeds itself properly, so you don't have too much sticking out, and all those kind of things. So those are all things that you got to kind of be aware of. So
it can take you longer sometimes to do grommets than string the racket.
Yeah,
really,
yeah, for sure,
depending on the company, the racket.
Yep.
That's why a heat gun is important too. A heat gun comes in handy. You can warm up the grommets, stretch them out a little bit, help them fit. But
yeah, that's a good point. I didn't write that on these items needed, but that would be another thing you need, because they're more pliable, right? Anytime you put a head guard on, or even a grommet kit, if you just heat it up a little bit with the heat gun, it's easier to form and go through those holes sometimes. So that's a good point. So a grommet set. The grommet set is very specific to every single racket. So you need to make sure before you take out any grommets that you have the exact replacement, whether it's the mid-size, not the oversized, the exact same model, all those kind of things, because otherwise you're going to get yourself stuck in a situation, because 90% of the time you're not going to be able to get the old grommets back in the racket.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So you're going to create some serious issue for yourself. And then you need an awl. There's a couple different kinds of awls. There's just a normal sharp awl, different thicknesses, and then there's the grinding awl that you're going to use for grinding out old grommets and so forth. Then you need pliers, usually the bent nose pliers that come with some of the toolkits, the stringing toolkits. And then, of course, the replacement bumper, that depending on if you're replacing that or not. And then, of course, tubing. Teflon type tubing, clear tubing, that you can get at some of the tennis companies as well. All right, on to the next thing, weight balancing. Now, this is something that is probably a little bit more advanced, so this might be for you later on to do. You don't need a lot of technical equipment to really get started. Really, what you need is just a basic balancing board. We'll talk about that in a minute, but so really what you're doing with weight balancing is you are adding or removing lead tape to change the balance of the racket. So first you, of course, need to know what the player is trying to achieve, whether they are trying to get more weight on the head, make it a little bit more head light, or balance it a little bit more evenly, or just kind of create a heavier racket all the way around to create a bigger force coming through. And generally what you'll do is kind of first take and put the racket and kind of figure out if it's head light, head heavy, how many points, how many inches it is each way. And then you have your lead tape that you can cut and put on the racket. You have a digital scale and a balance board and scissors. And that's kind of how you can balance and change the balance of a racket.
Yeah, I had a guy call me last week, and he just bought 3 new rackets off the shelf somewhere. And all 3 of them were the same racket, but slightly different balance points, right?
Yep.
Which is not unusual. And so I don't offer that service. It's something I should get into. I don't have the skill, but I do know. And if you're a stringer, an at-home stringer, or a stringer, I was able to recommend someone for him. So know who in your town might be able to help in an area that you don't have the ability to do. So I recommended he go to this place. But I also said, before you do that, I said, find out which racket feels the best to you and mark it. And tell them you want the other 2 to match the specs of this one, because this is the one that feels best to you. He said, oh, good point. I didn't think about that. You don't want to just take them and say, make them all the same. Play with them, decide which one feels best to you. Now, for me personally, I don't nitpick that much. You know what I mean? But some players are so analytical and so, like, I don't know what the word is, but everything's got to be exactly perfect. And for me, I'm like, I'll make the adjustment. You know, to me, it was never that big a deal. But if you're making a living at it, or if you're trying your best, it makes sense. Sure, get everything exact same. You might, if you have the mindset where you need that comfort, knowing that all of your equipment is the exact same, then by all means do it if it's going to drive you crazy.
Right. And, we are talking about scaling your racket stringing business. So if you've been kind of at a level where even you've had a shop and you've just done the basic services, to add this might be your next step. And there are organizations like the ERSA that has yearly workshops,
Yep.
and you can learn at a high level how to do this, because if you're definitely stringing on tour, you probably won't be doing this, but there is somebody in the team that would do something like this for the players at the tournaments. And sometimes it's done when a player, like a pro player, gets new rackets. The rackets, before they get to hit, before the rackets actually get to the player, they get modified by somebody else, a professional stringer that would possibly match all of the rackets the way that the player wants. And then the rackets, once they're all matched up to however the specs are, then they go to the player. And so there are, and players don't necessarily have to be, playing on tour to get a benefit from having the rackets all the same, because we all sometimes, because like you were saying, they don't come out right exact from the factory, and so sometimes you have to do a little bit of adjustment to make them all feel the same. And if you got 2 or 3 rackets, the whole purpose is you want them to feel the same when you pick one up after you've broken the string or something.
Yeah, right.
Stick, you want it to kind of feel fairly similar. So it is a good thing to learn. You don't need a lot of equipment to get started. You just got to really be willing to understand a little bit of math, a little bit of trial and error, but it's kind of fun, and you can charge a good amount for doing it, because it does take a little bit of time. And like Brad, you offered to help. I mean, you look for somebody that could do it for one of your clients, and so if you're that 1 or 2 people in a large area, it could definitely be a service that could bring in some additional revenue.
Yeah, I mean, I've added lead tape and things like that, and I know where to generally put it depending on what they're doing. But this is for swing weight calibration and get them all even. There are some machines you can purchase to help make it easier and this and that. And I haven't invested in those yet. How much are those? Have you looked at the price of those lately, or
of what the balance? The balance boards?
Yeah, something like that.
Those are usually about $30-$40.
Yeah.
Alpha has one, Head has one. Sometimes, if you have an account with one of those companies, you can get it pretty cheap from the rep or something like that.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing that you need. And it's a simple thing. You can actually make one. There's some YouTube videos where you can make one. Basically what you do is you just have to get a piece of wood, and you get something that you can just turn easy so that you can move the racket left and right. And then you measure the 26, 27 inches, on the spectrum there. And then that way you can, move it around to making it head heavier, head light. And it just creates a simple little balance beam. So, but they're about $30-$40. It's not
okay.
It's not too much. So that basically takes us through today's points on racket maintenance and tune-up. This is the 4th one in the series, and it's just kind of to give an overview of all these things are possible for you to scale your business, earn some additional revenue, and keep working towards being more proficient in this craft.
Yeah.
And I think that's it for today.
Yep, great video, Pat. Some good points, and you're kind of inspiring me. Maybe I will get into more racket customization and stuff. And the more you know, the more confident you're going to be as a stringer. So and it's important stuff. It's really good to know if you're trying to build your business and grow your business.
Exactly. All right, everyone, have a great day. Make sure you subscribe, share, like this video if it was valuable, and if you have a question, just leave it in the comments and we'll get back to you. Thanks.